courses was a little bit of a pun, but also to show my appreciation for the colleagues who volunteered to serve on this panel. Gina Perkins is an English professor, and she's taught at least 3 of the 8-week courses over the last semester, as has Jeff Sorrells, who is a speech professor, and Collin Burns is a mathematics professor. Each of them have taught at least 3, and they're on the schedule for teaching more this coming fall. I am on the schedule for the first time, and I had a fair amount of curiosity about this, and I was going to start talking to individuals, and I thought, well, maybe other people would be in the same boat as I am to rethink this. Even though we also have 5-week summer courses, it's that much different, and the pacing while simultaneously having 16-week classes is a little bit of a challenge, both for students and for faculty, I would imagine. So that's where Allison was open to me planning this webinar. I will turn it over to each of our panelists in turn to do a little bit more of an introduction. I would like you each to address how long you've been teaching overall, as well as at Collin, and the extent of your online teaching experience prior to the pandemic, so that all of us have a little bit more context about how familiar you are with the online component, at least. To situate it. Collin, if we could start with you, please. How long have you been teaching, and how long have you been at Collin?
I have been teaching at Collin as an adjunct ever since the fall of 2019, and then I just started full-time this past August. So I've been full-time for exactly 1 year.
Congratulations, that's great. And how much online teaching experience did you have before the pandemic?
Before the pandemic, really not any at all.
Okay.
I only started teaching online, obviously, after spring break
Okay.
in that semester. And so.
Thanks very much. It's just, I want us to have a sense of learning curves for adopting new things. So thanks very much. And Gina, how long have you been teaching, and how long have you been at Collin?
I guess I started teaching as a TA back in 2004. So I don't really want to do the math to count out how many years that is, but it seems like quite a few. I started teaching at Collin in 2013. So I guess I'm rounding year 7 or 8 or something here already. I'm not quite sure how that's possible. I had taught a little bit of online prior to coming to Collin, but that was with no instruction, no help, no ELC, just here's the content, teach it online. Probably about 2015, I started teaching an occasional online class here at Collin. So I had done the online training and the QM certification and all of that sort of stuff well before pandemic.
Thanks very much. And Jeff, you're still also kind of new to Collin, but I don't know how long you've been teaching either.
Okay, so I've been teaching since 2007. I was at a community college for 8 years, and then 5 years at a 4-year school teaching undergrad and graduate courses. And I still teach graduate courses for them entirely online. And then I started in August, same time as Collin. So just at a year now at Collin. Okay. And online, I've done pretty much since I started. I've done it 2 or 3 a year. Pretty consistently, and I've got some experience doing course shells as well. I've 4 or 5 of those.
Okay, well, thanks. And Jeff, have you done 8 weeks outside of Collin?
Yes.
You have. Okay. Thank you. Okay. So I first had my overall question. Because you've done it a few times and you're back on tap to do it more. I wanted to start with, what do you think are the benefits to students for the 8-week format? And I'll let you jump in if you want, or we could go round robin. Jeff, you've been doing it longest.
Okay, so I think I'm a huge believer in just offering as many formats and options to students as possible so that they can decide what works best for them. And I've taught almost every single way you can imagine, from 1-week courses to the full semesters to every format. And I've noticed that a lot of my students, the flexibility of the 8-week allows them to actually get more done in terms of, course load. Instead of just doing the 12 or 15, some of them are pushing the 18 to 21, especially the good ones. And then the second 8-week half allows people who might have been a little bit slow on the get up to still get some hours done in the semester if they didn't, register in time to start in, August or January. And so I like the flexibility of that.
Although I want to stay on that topic, I just wanted to ask for those students that, since you mentioned enrolling late, essentially for not missing out on the semester. I've read a little bit of the literature about that, and that sometimes there's mixed results for student success in courses when they've missed the boat the first part of the semester and ended up enrolling later. What's your personal experience in those situations?
Absolutely. In the past, I've noticed that. This past year, though, I think just the pandemic shook everybody up. They didn't know whether they wanted to take classes or not, and then they decided to. I didn't really notice a fall off in quality of students or performance.
Oh, good. Thanks.
Let me ask something here. Are we okay to talk, or is it just the panel members?
Well, I was going to invite others to jump in afterwards, but if you have something germane to add.
It sounds as though you're implying that it's going to be part 1 and part 2 of the same course. And when I've done this kind of thing, it's been completely different courses so that they don't lose a semester, but they're not saying, I don't want to go into trigonometry 2 if I haven't learned, 1, 2, 3. So I just want to make sure that that we do understand that it doesn't have to be part 1 and part 2 or a building block from that when it can be completely separate classes.
We don't have any of that. So I apologize if I was implying that. No, just allowing them to start late.
And I didn't clarify. Jeff does like one-off speech communications classes, and like so
Okay.
he has done
Okay.
them just like one at a time, or but they're not sequential in any way.
Okay.
Now,
I just want to make sure we were thinking about the same things because most of mine are you take this now, and of course we want them to be stacked or sequenced, but people say, this is my schedule. This is when I can go to school. They don't take that little chart and go, oh, first semester of the first year, I take this and this. They almost invariably, I would say 99% of them cannot do that just because their schedules are outside. Anyway, I'll
no, and that's fine. And thank you for helping us to clarify that. And I think that also speaks as well to Jeff talking about the flexibility of different ways of delivering, of instructional delivery and time.
I've been with Collin. I'm going into my 33rd year, and I've created curriculum. I'm like you, Jeff. I've taught. If there has been a way to do it, probably I thought of it and went in and did it, and so I'm real interested in what you're saying because we're going into another phase of it, and it's actually exciting times. But
Gina, did you have anything else you wanted to add about the benefits?
Well, I was going to say, because now I teach English, and the way Collin has it offered currently, it's Comp 1 is the first 8 weeks, Comp 2 is the second 8 weeks. So it is that sequential element. And so it does allow those students to get Comp 1 and Comp 2. It gets them through that sequence all in one semester. And at this point in time, at least on the McKinney campus, I can't speak for the college as a whole because I haven't seen the schedule for the college as a whole. We have only Comp 1 offered in that first 8-week slot and Comp 2 offered in that second 8-week slot. So for our department, it is that sequential move through for the students, where it's not necessarily that for everybody else, but it does allow those students to get through them faster.
Thanks. Collin, did you have anything you wanted to add about benefits that you see for students?
Well, I would agree a lot with what Jeff said about the flexibility, but for me, since I'm teaching math, a lot of the students at Collin, they only need 1 math credit. And so they're not looking to go into a sequence or something like that. They're taking college algebra and that's it. They're just going to take college algebra, or else they're taking statistics and then that's all they're going to take. And so for a lot of them, especially the ones that for whatever reason, the way they tested with TSI or whether something happened with their AP credits or something like that, a lot of the students, they've taken already calculus or math that would be considered to be a higher level than the college algebra, but for whatever reason, they're being required to take college algebra as a credit. And so for them to be able to get it over with, as it were, in 8 weeks, whenever it's a lot of it is review material for them, where they can, not that it's necessarily a self-paced class, they still have to abide by the pace of the course, but since it is coming so rapidly, they can, and the way that I have the class set up, they can work ahead on a lot of the homeworks. And so they can really just crank it out if they're already prepared for it and it is review material for them. Then it gives the student that opportunity to just go ahead in 8 weeks, be done with the college algebra and move on.
Thank you. And some of the literature supports that as well in terms of students' motivation in order to take some of these things about general requirements or something to get it out of the way as quickly as possible, along with that flexibility where it's like, well, I need to get that done so that I can move on with what I'm concentrating on too. I wanted to ask though too, where some people are skeptical about different types of courses or subject matter in itself. Have you talked at all with colleagues about their skepticism about taking what they conceive of generally as a 16-week course and condensing it in accelerated time in an 8-week format? Have any of you had any conversations, either pedagogically or anything like that, with colleagues? Nope. Okay, then we'll move on.
I haven't at Collin because I haven't really had conversations with any of my colleagues because I've only been here for a year. And it's pandemic. But in the past, I have dealt with that a little bit, Kathleen. And questioning the rigor of shorter courses. And I mean, all I can do is justify to myself, right, that my courses are just as rigorous in the short term. Building course shells has really helped me with that process, and having to really articulate the Carnegie units down to the half hour, and show where I'm expecting these students to provide the work and the effort. And so doing that has really helped a lot. And I think being able to, if a colleague questions that, I haven't really had anybody with the 8 weeks, but some of the shorter ones like the 5 weeks, I've definitely had those conversations before, mostly at conferences, more so than at work.
I think there's a danger when we're talking about things like this of trying to say it's either one size fits all, it is or it ain't, and that's not true. I think that pedagogically, if there's any question at all, you can say these particular courses, especially the ones that are the fundamentals, principles of whatever, maybe we can offer a section or so of that, but essentially we don't want that to be 5 weeks or even 8 weeks. We need them to be in there learning the alphabet before they jump into World Lit. And but with these others, they are adults chronologically. And I teach people from 16 through their 60s every semester, all from all over the world, as I'm sure all of you do. So there's a certain amount of life experience they bring that means that this particular course is one they could do in 8 weeks if we set it up properly, without having it be they get out and go, I can check it off the slate, but what did we do? But for other classes, there's a different way they need to learn it and have reflection time that does not lend itself to just shorten, because you want quality, not quantity.
Right, which is a nice segue, thank you, Gloria, to talking about setting up expectations in the classroom for students that fully understand what they're getting into, as well as our instructional decisions that we make for pacing and some of that. I was wondering, Jeff, if you could outline maybe some of the things that you specifically state in syllabus policies, and then we'll also talk about all three of you about communicating those things, not just in the syllabus specifically, but in reiterating certain things so that students, it sounds like there's, or at least from my understanding, some students are totally knowledgeable about what they're getting in for. But I know I had a student in a 16-week class who said, I enrolled in an 8-week class. I didn't realize it until my first day. And then I decided I would stick with it because it had happened to meet the same time frame that she was looking for. And she wasn't aware of the 8-week thing. So if we could start with you, Jeff, about some things that you think are key in syllabus policies that are useful for students understanding what they're in for in terms of the condensed time frame, particularly.
I don't change any policies in terms of course policies like attendance, late work, anything like that. I don't change any of them depending on the format. But in terms of letting them know what they're in for, that's always, anytime I teach a freshman level course, that's always something that I just assigned to myself as I'm going to teach these kids how to be college students because nobody really taught me how to be one. And I had to figure it out. And so a lot of them are in the same boat. We have so many first gens that they just don't know what they don't know. And so I really take an active role in explaining so many things to them, like what the expectation is for a 3-hour course. It's not 3 hours. It's 9 hours a week in a 16-week course. And so when it's an 8-week course, I posted announcements on Canvas. I do it on syllabus day in the first day class. I say, here is the expectation that 37.5 hours per credit hour is what you're going to be putting into this class. So if you're with me for 50 minutes during the pandemic, right, and it's an 8-week course, that means you're putting in about 7.5 to 8 hours outside of the course. And then I break that down for them. How much of it's supposed to be reading, how long each quiz should take you. And then I explain to them, look, some of you are going to be faster than that. Some of you are going to be slower than that. Some of you read fast, some of you write slow, some of you don't know how to type. And so I explained to them, you need to know yourself and you need to budget your time accordingly. And in an 8-week course, that becomes even more accelerated in terms of what you're expected to do each week. But I don't change any policies, and I make that clear to them that just because it's twice as fast doesn't mean they get extra time.
Okay. Gina, I saw you shaking your head a few times. Could you speak to the same things that Jeff did, syllabus as well as communicating expectations?
I operate about the same as Jeff does. I don't change things. Even when I'm teaching a 2-week Maymester or wintermester, it's still very much the same. Especially with wintermester, I use if you're spending three hours outside of class for every hour you're in class, look at the time you're devoting. So I use that same kind of model with my students in the shortened format classes, just so they know what they're getting into. But yeah, I don't change things. The pace moves faster, but that's really about it.
Okay. And how about you, Colin?
Well, for me, I noticed in something similar to what you were talking about, Kathleen, this lack of awareness from some of the students of what they're getting into with the 8-week. And I was speaking with my associate dean about that as well. And they're aware and they're working with the advising office to try to encourage them to promote the 8-week as an 8-week class and to make sure that students, whenever they're signing up for the 8-week class, that they understand that that's different from a normal class, that the normal class is 16 weeks. And so for me, I like to tell the students at the beginning that if they feel like the 8-week is not going to work out for them, for example, with the college algebra, if they're not one of the students who's prepared and it's review for them, if they're a student that maybe is a returning student and they haven't taken a math class in 20 years or something and they need a lot of refresher and stuff like that, then I tell them that they really need to consider trying to get into a 16-week class or just doing basically being aware and doing their due diligence about what's going to be required for them to succeed in the 8-week format. And if they don't think that they can cut it, then by all means, on the first day, while it's still convenient to do so, to look at getting into a 16-week section for that class.
Thanks. Do you all offer extra credit in your courses?
In my courses, I usually offer some type of an extra credit for doing the student evaluations, just something to try to encourage people to do it, some type of a little nominal kind of a reward for doing that one. But other kind of extra credit, especially in the 8-week class, I think that it's not very feasible because they're already spending so much time. If the students are actually doing the coursework, then I don't think that there's any time to add something additionally to that to give them extra credit.
Okay. How about you, Gina and Jeff?
I keep my extra credit the same as I would in the 16-week classes. It's usually just 1 or 2 minor assignments throughout the semester that go in with their daily work grade. So it's nothing big, it's nothing huge. It's enough to make that possible, that bump from an 89 to a 90. It's not enough to recover a full grade or anything like that, but I keep it the same as during the regular semester.
And you, Jeff?
Same as Gina, pretty much. I don't have any consistent extra credit. I teach speech. And so if there's something going on campus that somebody's trying to get extra people coming to that involves a speaker, I'll usually offer extra credit for that. I did it for like the presidential debates and certain things like that. I also use extra credit occasionally as like a like very small amount as a like a competitive incentive for certain activities in my class. So like the winning team gets 3 points on their next test or something like that, and they like it, so mostly just that, but nothing different for the 8 weeks versus anything else.
Okay. If I could pivot to you, Jeff, do you have a late work policy or any grace period in the student submissions of work?
Yeah, I do. And again, it varies by classes. For my straight public speaking class, there is a incredibly firm no late speeches policy, because I've learned with the anxiety that comes with public speaking that everybody's grandma dies speech week. And so I've just had to put a very firm, hard stop on that. Discussion boards, very firm, hard stop on those as well, because as I say to my students, if you're standing in an empty room talking, that's not a conversation. You have to be there when everybody else is. Quizzes, same way. I do weekly quizzes. Those have a hard, firm stop. Other things that I do give a little bit of grace in terms of late work on, little homework assignments, certain things, because sometimes people do need additional time, just based on life. And so I tend to give a fair amount of grace on those kinds of things. And it's the same for my 8 weeks as it is for anything else.
Gina?
Again, my policy stays the same from the regular course. For their major assignments, so their essays, for that sort of stuff, if it's late, if it's late, I'll take it essentially at any time in the semester, but the high grade that they can get on it is a 70. So the maximum grade for a late, it doesn't matter whether it's 2 hours, 2 weeks, or 2 months late, a 70 is as high as it can get. For the daily work, the stuff that builds, again, it's a writing class. So you have to have your draft on a certain day. You have to have your peer workshop completed. For those things that build, I don't take them late. For quizzes and discussion boards that don't necessarily build in that way, I'll take them late for half credit.
Okay. And how about you, Colin?
For me, the main assignments and it's not necessarily that I would take them late, but on the homework assignments, because that's for the math classes, basically what there's the homeworks and then there are the tests. And so the tests in the 8-week class come up about every 2 weeks. And so there's always a test just right around the corner. But for the homework assignments, and it's the same that I do with the 16-week classes, it's not that I'll take the late work. It's that if the students approach me and they say, hey, we really didn't have time to do this one, this homework came up too fast, then I'll just postpone the due date for everyone. Because really for that, the due dates are more just kind of a benchmark where the students can look at what the due dates are and they can say, okay, if I want to be going at a reasonable pace, then I should complete it by this date. Or especially if I want to do the homework that's going to be on this upcoming test, then I have to do it before the test, obviously. But if the students want to have the due date pushed back, then I will do it for them. And they have to come to me and ask me for that. I won't just do it automatically if I see that only half the class did the homework. But if the students ask me for it, then I'll do that. And so it encourages them to communicate about their needs as well. And it's helped me to adjust what the pace should be for the class as well.
Okay. And you said that tends to be the case though in your 8-week and your 16.
Right, exactly. I just noticed that for the 8-week, the students, they were, because it was a new thing also. So for me, it was, some of the due dates needed to be adjusted anyways. And so I learned that basically by seeing how the students dealt with it and then getting their feedback. But regardless, even if I think that the due dates are appropriate, then if they ask for the extension, then I'll give it to them. And they understand as well that I'm giving them the extension, but they should have done it already to have the practice, because they're going to have to take the test anyway. With even if they do the homework after the test, they can recover that part of their grade for it, but there's no way to get that practice. And so if they messed up on the test because they did not practice enough, then that's their
Right.
fault.
Right. And part of, particularly in your subject area, you're also, it's not just the test, it's the building upon the knowledge in order to advance through the course itself as well, instead
Right.
of just like one-off little bits that they're learning at a time, particularly. And that speaks a little bit to Gina's, like when you're working on a draft for a longer paper, that you are building upon those kinds of things, that you have those milestone assignments that have been chunked out or scaffolded throughout the semester. Thank you. With your attendance policies, I know Gina and Jeff, you said that you don't have any changes. What in general is your attendance policy? What happens if a student misses a class? Jeff?
I'll go first. Obviously we all got put in a weird situation last year with attendance. So I'm just going to discard last year and talk about before that. I do attach a portion of my grade to attendance, and they start with 100% on that. Then every time they miss a class, they're going to automatically lose a percentage of points off of that. And I do tell them, it doesn't really matter the excuse, because I tell them, I'm trading you for the professional world. And if you don't go to work, you don't get paid. And so they do automatically lose those points. And I build grace in there as well, basically about an absent to 2 absences, depending on how many meetings we have, of grace points. And then I also, and I do this with late work as well, is I'll forgive certain things if they have a conversation with me, because it's just every single time I get to then talk to them about, okay, so is this the kind of college student you want to be, right? And usually, it's a one-off, kind of deal, and they've got a real situation. And then in those situations where it's a continuing thing, they have to keep having conversations with me, right? And so it's like my children. I'm just you've got to get this through your head. This is not going to be a successful approach for you in long term. And so, so my attendance policy, like I said, 8 weeks is the same. But because we have fewer meetings, I have more percentage of the points attached to each attendance or each day of attendance. And so it's a bigger penalty for them to miss class.
Okay. And Gina?
I don't necessarily have, my syllabus is basically a come to class, you need to be in class. If you miss class, you're missing instruction, you're missing information. It will be harder for you to keep up and to do well in this class if you're not here. But I don't have any attendance policy that takes away points or does things if they're not in class. Now, if we take a quiz in class and they miss the class, they've missed the in-class quiz, they've missed some of those assignments. So, in-class assignments can't always be made up if they're missing class. So there are points, I guess, connected to attendance in that way, but I don't have a policy that says if you miss X number of classes, these bad things happen.
Okay.
And I will point out that I do teach communication, so a lot of the stuff
Right.
that they're supposed to be
Model.
practicing and doing is in class with other human beings.
Right. Yeah. And Colin, I think I pivoted a little bit, but would you just speak a little bit about your attendance policy, please, for the 8 week?
Right. So my my course that I teach, or my courses, are completely opposite to Jeff, where a lot of the material, that we're doing is just with math. And so the students are practicing, and it's great if they practice together, but it can be reasonably done individually. And so I have all pre-recorded lectures that are available for my face-to-face, the same way that it would be with an online class. So the material is available in a video format that's posted online. And so the face-to-face have access to that. And the students, if they miss the class, then that material is there. There's a lecture that goes with the class, and they have all of their homework and stuff is already online as well. And so the only time that students are required to be in class is whenever we're taking a test, and that's just so that it can be proctored. And so a lot of times the students, because I work on basically the honor system with that a lot as well, that people will come up with reasons why they can't be in class to take the test. And so then that I kind of deal with that on an individual basis. But I mostly don't have people abusing that normally on the day. Even if a lot of the times the attendance in the class is very low, on the test day everybody shows up, and so it seems to work out pretty well.
Okay. And that works also with what you indicated is there's a high flexibility you have for self-pacing for students as well then too.
Right.
Thank you. What are the biggest differences that you find in your instructional delivery between the 8-week and say a 16-week class as an instructor?
I'll go first. Mine is overwhelmingly pacing. Is figuring out how to pace the course properly so that they're learning, practicing, and then demonstrating skills in an appropriate manner. In a 16-week course, especially with like public speaking and professional communication that I've taught, 500,000 times already, I know exactly how the pacing should go for public speaking over 15 weeks. But when you start shortening it up, I have to start overlapping certain things. So, for example, my business and professional communication, there's a couple primary things that they have to do, like resumes, cover letters, and interviews, big group project, and a big speech. And in a 15-week, I can break those up into about 5 weeks each, and have them start after the other one's finished. But as the course gets shorter, it doesn't work. And so I have to make sure that they understand that hey, you still need to be working on this thing, but I'm going to introduce this thing right now, and kind of tell them how they're supposed to be kind of breaking down their time there, what they're supposed to be turning in for each one of them. And there's certain things that I just will not teach if it gets too short of a time period. I will not teach public speaking anything shorter than 3 or 4 weeks. I don't think it's pedagogically sound to do that. There's just not enough time to do the kind of creative work that they need to do. There's other courses that I think can be done in a week if you are very intense about it, right? And so, yeah, the pacing and the development of concepts I put a lot of work into that, thought work into that for each course.
Thanks. Collin, how about you?
It's an interesting question, and also it's a little bit difficult to tell what it would be like teaching a normal 8-week class, because all of my 8-week classes this past year were also split with the AB schedule.
Yes,
And so, right, there was even half again
right.
of the classes were eliminated. And so the meeting times were even at a higher premium for this past year than they would be, what I'm assuming, for the 8 weeks that are coming up in the fall. But for the students, the most valuable way to spend the class time that I can tell is for the students to be working on problems, and especially working together. I like to pair students up and have the problem sets for them to work on, or else let them work on the homework problems. And then I can kind of float around and see the students work. Since the lectures, like I've already mentioned previously, are available, and all of the class notes with the corresponding stuff that's coming from me, they have access to that before the class starts. And so I encourage everybody to look at that and at least be aware of what the material is, so that we can spend the least amount of class time going over that, what's already available to them, and spend more class time on the students actually working on the problem, so that I can see what they're doing.
And can intervene if they encounter something that they're,
Right,
they're not
exactly.
expecting.
And give them an opportunity also to ask questions about what's going on in the homework, because since it's the online homework and they have already some kind of built-in feedback that's with that whichever online utility we're using, there's, you know, they can see their answer and they can see what they're getting wrong, and sometimes there'll be a link where it will give a small explanation about the problem or something like that. But a lot of times that's, you know, that's only so helpful. Really, the students, they want to ask, well, I keep missing this one, I don't really get what's going on in the explanation. So I want to give the most amount of time that the students will need to ask those kind of questions as well during class, and try to lecture the least amount as possible.
And so it sounds like that actually optimizes the learning for the students, in a different way of problem solving, about saying, I don't understand why I'm not getting the answer right. And so you can intervene more surgically, I guess, in their learning in that way. How about you, Gina? What do you find the what biggest differences with 16-week to 8-week? And also say, I'm guessing you probably also had the AB split challenge as well.
For the first semester, I had the AB split. For the second semester, my class ended up low enrollment. And I just gave the students the option, do you want to do this where we meet once a week and then do the other component of the class online, or would you rather meet 2 days a week? And the students chose on that one to meet 2 days a week. So that one was just a regular 8-week class with the same students Tuesday and Thursday. And that seemed incredibly easy after the fall semester. And the biggest challenge, at least for me, for the fall semester, now the last fall was my first time to teach the 8-week classes. And you all remember what week 1 was like, of getting the students in the right places. And for the 8-week classes, a bigger challenge, because not only did we have our students showing up, but at least for my classes, I had the students showing up who were in the second 8-week classes, who didn't realize that their class had shifted to an 8-week class. Remember, all of our things got magically rearranged and just kind of, here you go. And so I had not only my students, but the second 8-week students showing up and saying, I'm here for class. And then this isn't that class and you're not on my roster. And so the biggest challenge with that first 8-week class was that I planned it as an 8-week class, but that first week was so chaotic that there wasn't really any learning and instruction that took place. So now we're into week 2 and we didn't accomplish week 1.
You had hoped to.
And so that really, for me, again, this was also my first time teaching an 8-week class at all. I'd taught 10-week, 12-week, 14-week, 5-week, 2-week, but never 8. And so that really threw my whole pacing off for the first class. And that was something that the second time around, it's like, okay, I've got to fix this. And so it was making sure that I had the pacing right for an 8-week class, but also that there was at least a little wiggle room and a room for flexibility if things got thrown off again. And for that class with the AB split, it was making sure that I had time in class for kind of that guided practice. Okay, let's write a thesis statement. Here's how you write a thesis statement. Now you try it. Let's see what you come up with. And then, okay, let's correct, model, modify. So definitely time for that hands-on, that guided practice, kind of that 5-minute lecture and then moving on and let's practice what we just talked about. And then also with a writing class, no matter how clear you make the instructions, students still don't quite understand the instructions the way that you want them to. We joke about how we speak English, teacher, and students sometimes need a translator because they don't speak English, teacher. And so I would make sure that we were explaining and going through each assignment sheet for the major assignments together in class, so that that way they had the opportunity to ask questions so that they knew what they were doing for the next week and a half or 2 weeks, and we weren't starting out confused. So we'd make sure that, okay, we're all on the same page here. We all know what we're doing, and now let's go forward. But yeah, it's primarily pacing, making sure that the structure and sequence of assignments would work. Like Jeff said, in his classes, he had to kind of overlap things. I had to do that as well. Okay, this assignment is due on Thursday. You have to finish that up. But now we're starting on this next one here on Monday, because we have to keep moving forward. So there was a lot more of that overlap than what would be in a 16-week class.
I wanted to ask, it sounds like all of you have a lot of in-person, like the problem solving for Colin and listening in and having paired work. Were you already engaging in a lot of active learning activities of students interacting as well as you with them? Colin, you said you had you have all of your lectures. Gina, you had said like maybe a 5-minute lecture and then guided practice and then more of that. And Jeff, with communication, I have a little bit of a sense of there's more dynamism in your classroom as well. Are there things that you adopted or instructional activities that you adopted more so in the 8-week than you would otherwise have used? Or is it more of the structure and pacing that is different? If that sounds clear enough.
I would say more of the structure and pacing that are different. Really, the only major change that I made to assignments, and I didn't like this change at all, but it was COVID related, not 8-week related, was, usually we are doing peer workshops where you are sitting there right beside your workshop partner, writing on each other's papers. And with COVID, it's like, okay, and social distancing, that took a lot of our peer workshops and put them on the computer, which I do that anyway. I do use the online tools for peer workshops when they're in that out of class component, but I had to pull that in a lot more because, again, distancing. And so that was one, I guess, major change that I made with the 8-week classes, with all of my classes, because of COVID. And that was really the only major change like that to kind of the instructional model and the activities I used. And like I said, that was not related to course structure, but just related to kind of health and necessity.
Right. How about you, Colin? Had you?
For me,
go ahead, Jeff.
I'll make it short. Given that most of the stuff that I've taught in an 8-week, I've done online as well. I have some form of learning activity that can be done in an online format. And so really it's just a benefit analysis of, okay, what would the students benefit most from doing in person? And then kind of taking out the appropriate number of them and putting them online, kind of deal. And so even with the split A/B had even forced that even more. I almost just taught those almost as an online class where I sometimes did stuff, in person and used most of my online teaching methods.
Okay. And Colin, you had talked about that you had you taped yourself lecturing even before the pandemic? Did you rely on that beforehand, or was that something that you did because of the pandemic and then continued to use it with the 8-week courses?
It was something that I did because of the pandemic situation. And the recorded lectures I did for the 8-week class, it was for the face-to-face. I wasn't doing it for the benefit of the online classes as much as for the face-to-face, because in the 8-week class, the first semester, the first 8-week section, I realized we're not going to have time to do lectures really in class, and the amount of lecture that we do, it's going to be cut way down. And so there's no way we're going to get through this material. And so that's why I just started recording the lectures so that the students could watch them for that face-to-face class. And then we could spend the class time doing other stuff. And that kind of gets into what Jeff was talking about, that the classes, they felt more like an online class where we just have once a week, we meet in person to do kind of like a a problem session and work together on stuff. So it was mostly online, and then in class trying to prioritize what's going to be the best for the students and stuff like that.
I know we're running short on time, and I did want to see if there were any questions, but from the attendees. But I had two questions for all of you that I wanted to ask. Is there anything that you and I know, Jeff, you've been doing the 8 weeks a lot longer, but is there anything that you wish you knew? Like once you got into it, you're like, oh, I wish I had thought about this or had anticipated this in getting into an 8-week course.
I can start out. I would say not really. The 8-week class, I ended up, obviously, since I'm doing it again, I liked it a lot. I think it works really well. It keeps the class very exciting. And so to me, it's good. Everything's good about it.
Thanks.
I would say, and we've been talking a lot about in the classroom and the students, which all of that is what we need to be talking about. But also I want to talk about you and your teacher brain, because like I said, back in the fall, when things were just kind of distributed, I ended up in what I would consider a non-ideal situation for an 8-week class. My 8-week class was a Tuesday, Thursday at like 1 o'clock. And it was 8 weeks. I also had in the same classroom a Monday, Wednesday at 1 o'clock that was the exact same class that was a 16-week. So my brain had an incredibly difficult time remembering which day we were on and what schedule we were on. And it did not do good things for my teacher brain. That was incredibly difficult for me. So I would say watch your schedule and make sure that you're setting things up so that you're not going to make things incredibly difficult on yourself as far as your brain keeping things straight. Now, yes, I've taught 8 weeks. Again, 8 weeks is great, but it's a matter of making sure that you're setting yourself up. Maybe it's a different class or a different classroom, setting yourself up in a way that your brain is going to be able to handle that and not get things messed up and mangled.
I'm so glad I'm not the only one, Gina, who has that. I tried it so hard to get my schedule. So it's like Monday, Wednesday is the same class. Tuesday, Thursday is my other class. And then I have 2 8 weeks this coming fall. And I made sure that they're exactly the same. First 8 weeks, second 8 weeks, same class, same time slot, same days. Even I think it's even the same room, just so my brain doesn't get all wonky. And the other thing is that I wish I had known when I started teaching these alternate format courses is twice as fast doesn't always mean twice the work. I think it's maybe 2.5 times the work. And you have to be very proactive about it, because, you know, in a 16-week course, if you have a student who kind of falls a week or two behind, I can sometimes catch them back up. But in an 8-week, I mean, they're done. If they're 2 weeks behind right off the bat, you know, they're not going to be able to make it back up. And so I have to remind myself, like, very, very proactive about, you know, providing quick feedback on grading. I always prioritize my shorter classes over my longer classes in terms of getting them feedback as soon as possible, so that they know where they stand, keeping grades constantly updated, because, you know, if you're on a 2-week grading thing, you know, by the time you grade week 2 stuff, you're at midterms, and they don't know that they're failing yet. And so very, very proactive about grading, and just make sure you budget the time that you need to put into it.
Yeah. Now, for my second semester of 8-week, and I have several different, I'm not one of those teachers that does the same thing every time and every semester. I'd be bored with that. So I have several different kind of versions of, say, a Comp 2 class. I went as far as using a different textbook and a different assignment sequence for my 8-week and my 16-week classes, just to help keep my brain straight. Because now, do I think I'd have to do that this next semester? No, probably not. But just to make sure that I was more, you know, connected to those classes and that I wasn't getting myself and then my students confused. And that worked beautifully for me. But I know not every department division has multiple textbooks and, multiple syllabi that you're working from. So that, like I said, worked great for me, but I don't know that it would work for everybody else.
Well, I think those are valuable tips, and that was you both anticipated my also the question about our personal time management for faculty, with Jeff saying 2.5 times, but also prioritizing the shorter course because students need to know that much more quickly. Collin, do you have any other tips, even if they're just more particular to you, about time management? Also, in thinking about, I'm guessing that you also taught 16-week classes simultaneously with the 8-week classes. Are there any things that worked for you, or that you had to manage a little bit differently?
Right, and I even had a 14-week class as well. They had one of these 14-week one, and so I had all of them were college algebra. I had the 8 weeks, the 16 weeks, and the 14 weeks running at the same time. And so I would just, in the morning, whenever I got to my office, I would pull up the calendars for those 3 classes, and I would just look back and forth at the calendars and just study them and be like, okay, so we're doing this. And then before I'd go to the class, I would just double check what's going on so that I could come to the class and let the students know, hey, you guys know that the test is coming up, because then in the other class, it's like the test is a week later. And then in the other class, it's all different. And so, yeah, it is difficult to keep that all straight. And as far as the time management goes, a lot of times I would want to spend more time in class on doing something and kind of allow the class to get, even if it gets behind a little bit in the 16-week, you always have a little bit of time that you can play catch up later. But for the 8-week, it was the exact opposite. It was, we've got to go really fast. And so erring on the side of going too fast rather than too slow, because there would be no time to catch up. And so I was always just keeping that sense of urgency for myself, that we need to press ahead and need to encourage the students, give them a boost of morale about staying on top of things and trying to work ahead as much as possible, and always keeping in mind what's coming up.
Thank you. Do you have any parting advice that I might not have asked you about, that you would share with anybody who's for the first time going to teach an 8-week hybrid? And anything
one
apart
thing.
from what you've already.
Do the prep work ahead of time. That is the abs. I mean, I've always done that even with my longer classes. I don't remember who said it at the very beginning of, I like to have everything ready for the whole semester before the semester starts. And that becomes even more important when you get to your 8 weeks. And even those second 8 weeks courses, you don't want to be sitting at week 7 of the semester going, oh no, I've got a class starting next week. I've got to get that on Canvas. I've got to get that going. And so, yeah, spend your off time getting everything ready to roll would be my advice.
Thank you. I'm just seeing Gina and Collin nodding there.
Yep,
I don't.
I would agree.
Allison, I don't see any questions, I don't think, in the.
No, I haven't seen any questions in the chat yet.
I have a quick question. If you don't mind me asking the panelists, with an 8-week hybrid, okay, let's just use the Tuesday, Thursday scenario. How did y'all choose which day to meet on campus? Did you choose an early, like let's all meet on Tuesday, so you have the remaining of the week to do X, Y, and Z, or did you feel that meeting on the Thursday, where that Tuesday class time, they really delved into their online learning, and then you met on Thursday to answer questions and do in-class activities? How did y'all decide which approach would work best?
I didn't have a choice. I mean, we were on AB, and so, and all my classes were so large that I had to split them.
What are y'all going to do this semester, since we're not doing AB anymore?
I'll just tell them to come both days and maximize in-class time. I found that students don't question if you tell them that's the way it is.
Again, Kim, part of that conversation that we had before the webinar started, in seeking guidance, my understanding from my AD is the expectation is that for my 8-week hybrid, I am in the classroom with my students on both days of the week. So I just want to let you know that I had just said if I wanted to do whatever, it seemed like the online for one of the days a week was not something that would be welcomed by my AD. So again, if we have global guidance from the district, or if it's on a academic division or whatever division dean or ADs that you're working with, it might vary, but at least insofar as mine is, that's been communicated.
Yeah, I would love some global guidance on that as well, because so what y'all are saying is that students can come either day, but they're not required, but faculty should be in the classroom to, I mean, I don't want to just show up and be like, okay, what questions do you have? But I don't want to give some of my, because I'm teaching hybrid, but it's not 8-week, it's 16. That, I mean, that's one of the main reasons why I wanted to attend this, is just to get some feedback, like on the approach. I am so lost with this.
Well, in terms of the way that the 8-week hybrid has been explained to me, the hybrid being 50% online and 50% face-to-face is definitely is the way that the 8-week has to work. For a 16-week hybrid, there tends to be a little bit more flexibility, but I've taught a 16-week hybrid where it was only meeting once a week and the other half was supposed to be delivered online. So it was different in that way. And also because of the circumstances of the pandemic has changed things in the AB schedule, even when we're first introducing the 8-week, there's a lot of questions that still need to be figured out. Our campus, at least, I don't know if it was throughout the district, had modified blended last year, which was just for the, just in case we need to go online because of the pandemic, but they've taken that away and they've reintroduced the idea that hybrid is supposed to be 50% or more is face-to-face, and blended is supposed to be more than 50% online, and it tends to be way more than 50% online for blended. But that's only what's been reaffirmed to me within my academic division.
Is anyone here, or is anyone teaching a hybrid 16-week course? Anyone in this seminar?
Now, I have some that are labeled as hybrid, and that just may be our campus. The only things that I have that are labeled as, actually everything that I'm looking at my schedule here, everything that I have is labeled as either hybrid or web. I don't have anything, even my ones that are face-to-face 3-day-a-week classes, they have the label as hybrid on there.
Yeah.
But what my associate dean conveyed to us, and again, I can't speak for higher than that, is that everything this semester would be labeled as hybrid with the expectation that it would be face-to-face as scheduled, but essentially the hybrid label is there so that if we do have to go online or have to go AB or have to modify in some way, that we easily have the capability to do so.
And also that students will have the expectation that they have to have some kind of computer thing to be able to complete the course requirements.
Okay, I feel like that is very misleading to the students, because students are signing up expecting a hybrid course, and they're not going to actually be receiving a hybrid course. That has been my main concern. I mean, I've even gone so far to compose an email to my student. I haven't sent it out yet, but because my face-to-face class, like one of them's already full, I'm like, what are your expectations? Like, I don't know what they think that they're signing up for. Do y'all understand my concern?
Yeah,
like, I feel like this is a real big concern district-wide. I really, really do.
Now, I've taught hybrid classes in the past. When
I have too, and it was a 50-51%, and that's not how this is. That's not what our leadership team is expecting.
Correct. But when I've had hybrid classes pre-pandemic, they had a certain class, there was a designated time for them to meet. Usually it was once a week during that kind of regular class period. So I think what they've got here is they've got that full time blocked for us with the expectation that we'll use it, but kind of with the caveat that if something happens, we may not.
Mary Angie here. I'm sorry, but it's like deceptive advertising for our students. I mean, one of the reasons my students in Florida took hybrid classes was because they knew ahead of time, if it was the Tuesday class, that's when we meet. The rest of the week, we're doing things online and you can work, because work is a big thing, you know, or it's still a big thing for those students here too. So this is like, I even told some of them who said, oh, I kind of like this blended format because I've been able to work. And I said, well, next semester, then when we come back to, you know, face-to-face, then look for classes that are hybrid, because it may give you that same, you know, freedom of just being able to work, you know, because you have to earn money. So yeah, this is like weird. This sounds just to me like I am teaching in an 8-week face-to-face class. It's like, sorry, that's what it is. If I were to take one on, it's not really hybrid. Come on. Sorry, not sorry. Yeah, that's just like 2 cents on that.
It is confusing.
Well, and because of that, I think it goes back to a little bit about what Jeff and Dina and Colin, I think, have all communicated, is letting students know right up front what the expectations are if you in your course calendar about when testing is and whatever the policies are that adjoin it. But by iterating, like Jeff has said about, okay, so this much time in the classroom means within this time period, you have this much more time outside of the classroom that you'll be devoting to the class. And I think that's the best way that we can do, since we can't change necessarily how the coding of courses it takes place for other reasons, for pandemic planning, I think, and not to necessarily give an excuse, but because it's hard to be able to shift more quickly. And I think it's being trying to assure that the students understand what may be expected of them, and then we have to determine how we direct them within that frame.
I have face-to-face classes. I have lectures, and if we were to have to go online, whether my class is labeled a lecture or hybrid, I'm still going to have to go online if something were to happen. So I just think that they're posting hybrid because most kids signed up first for online classes, as you've been looking at the sign up, right? And then next they're going to go for hybrid because they think they're going to have that online component. And last, then they'll choose the face-to-face lecture is what it's looking to be. So I think this is being done to get the students to sign up for classes, but they're not really getting what they're signing up for.
Exactly. That's
what it looks
I made that statement. I said, I feel like it's misleading, it's false advertising. And I mean, and as an instructor, I don't know how to plan. I don't know how to plan my curriculum, because I don't know really, there's no continuity from one discipline to the next on how this needs to be taught.
No, I don't have one. I was looking forward to, because I did some, you know, a lot of our classes were hybrid in Florida. So I thought, hey, this is something I could definitely do here because I've done it before, but it was the 51-49 because of SACs. But, you know, the kids would get the schedule ahead of time so they could plan their work accordingly. This sounds like, yeah, no, this is face-to-face with quizzes on campus. That's what I'm going to call it.
I do appreciate the panelist input. Y'all provided a lot of helpful tips.
Yes, definitely. I really appreciate your time, and I've benefited already just from our conversation. Some things that I thought that I needed to do, I think are just underlined and circled and highlighted that much more. So I truly appreciate your time and your expertise and sharing with us. I appreciate it.
Thank you for having us.
I guess we're all set. I hope I'll actually get to see you all on campus at some point this fall.
Thanks, Kathleen. I'll definitely see you.
Thank you, Jeff. Thank you, Gina. Thank you, Colin.
Thank you, everyone. This was a great discussion. Thank you, Kathleen, for putting this together.
Thanks, Allison. Have a good one.
You too.
Thank you, everybody.